In this video, I will show you step by step how to paper quill this spindle that would be perfect for a dollhouse table. We will be using this image as a reference to some table legs. You will also need some copy paper or recycled copy paper, some Q-tips, and if you want to make your legs all at one time, which might be easier to help them match, keep them all looking the same, do 4 at a time. You'll need a straight edge ruler, the exacto knife, and some glue or a utility knife and a cutting mat. The very first thing that I do is I trim off these fuzzy ends of the Q-tips. I don't, where I cut it off, it looks jagged. I'm just going to smooth out those rough edges. Maybe even try to taper it a little bit. And you will want to do both ends. See how that looks? That looks much better than that jaggedy edge. And this is just a suggestion too, but when you glue on your first strip of paper, decide how far down you want to go. I'm going to go down about this much. That leaves a good amount to glue up into this piece of the leg whenever you create that. So I'll just make a mark there to know to start there. When I worked on my other table, I had 2 of these cut, and I cut them the same length, and I lined them up, and I made that mark so it matched. The very first piece that I'm gonna start with will be this little section right here. I'm not really going to make the leg look exactly like this, of course. I'm using this as a reference to kind of help me get an idea of how I want the leg to look. I have measured in about 1/8. And even if you don't want to measure, you can just look with your eye and, leave yourself that much. I've already angled this side, this straight edge of the paper. So you will, if you just come in that much on your paper, it's going to be straight on one edge and not angled. And what you really want is a long, skinny triangle. I've come in about 1/8. And I have my ruler ending up down here where you comes down to a point. So this is my long, skinny triangle. It's about 1/8 of an inch at this end, and down at this end it's just barely a hair. Just put it right there with that mark. I'm putting my paper right below that mark, and I'm gonna let it sit a minute, because if you move it around too much, it'll keep popping off. You're just going to roll it, but it's going to slowly taper in towards the center on both sides. And that's what creates that rounded appearance instead of a straight, hard edge. See how it's kind of creating that curve? And that is how the beginning of your spindle will look. The next section is much bigger. So my next piece will be a triangle as well, but this one's going to be wider. I want it to be a little bit more pronounced than the one above it. We need to cut a piece that's straight, but we're not going to quill the whole piece onto it. I want mine to stick out just a little bit farther, so we know that we need to have a longer piece. I'm going to use this to kind of beef it up a little bit. So I usually start by folding it in half. I even take off a little bit more because you don't want it to be much bigger, you just want it to be slight. So you could even just cut this in half and glue it right directly underneath the piece you just quilled. Give that glue a minute to dry. Be sure to keep it tight and glue when you get to the end, and you'll have something that's looking like this. And now I've cut a triangular piece, but it's the same width as the strip that we just glued on right here. And we're going to glue it where it butts up right next to where we finished the previous piece. So it's getting glued right over that section. It'll look something like that. And this one is going to be like the top one. You're not going to keep any edges straight because it's going to slowly taper inwards, creating that curved appearance, looking almost like a bead. And there you have that look. So you can see it's not exactly like it, but it's giving you an idea. You can create a pretty wide strip, well, triangle that will glue here to create this piece. Just as long as you leave yourself enough room here at the bottom for these two pieces, or three, whatever you feel like, and leaving yourself just a little bit that's unquilled, like I'm doing here, to create the foot. So I've cut a long triangle. So this one's just going to get glued on right under here. And my triangle is not exact, and that's okay. And it's going to taper, so you don't have to keep anything lined up. See how it's tapering? It's tapering in towards the center, and that creates that curved look. And I don't know if I like that. I think what I might want to do is do it where it's straight on one side and angled on the other, and it only tapers at one end. I feel like it needs to not be tapered at both. I'm just trying to visualize this. So I'll undo all of this and I'll show you a different look, and then you have an option. I'll save this though in case I like it. I'll just reuse it. This edge is straight, and the bottom edge has a slant. So to remember that, sometimes when I cut them out, I'll put a little line on the straight edge, just so when I come over here to glue it, I don't get mixed up, because when you're looking at it this way, it's really hard to tell which one has the straight edge. I want to glue the straight edge to here because the table legs taper down. They get smaller as they get down to the end. I want this piece to taper down this way. Sorry for my rough voice. When the weather starts to change, it gets this way. This top edge is the straight one. You need to keep it lined up. Right. So keep these edges, the edge that you have rolled onto your Q-tip and this edge, keep those together and lined up. This edge is going to taper. And now you can see how it's starting to taper down. I don't know if you can tell how it's looking so far. I'm trying not to hold it. Anyway, that's what we've got so far. I wanted to show you this picture. This is a picture of a table that I did when I was trying to figure out how to make the spindle legs. I had joined a contest on Instagram, and this was how I made my spindle legs. But back then, when I was paper quilling, which I didn't know I was paper quilling, back then I didn't know about cutting triangular shapes and slanted on one side. So this was all just done with strips of paper. If you get mixed up with some of these triangles and things, you can always just make a leg like this too. Anyway, I thought you might get a kick out of seeing my old spindle legs from about 8 years ago. This has been on my mind for so long, and I've been experimenting, and with my kitchenette video, something just clicked and the spindle leg came out perfect, and I was just thrilled. Now we're going to work at the bottom of the leg, so we're going to make this little piece right here. And it's just like this, the first piece that we put on. Okay, and now we're going to put this little piece on, which is just like the very first one, except instead of using the full length of the paper, the triangle, I cut off 2 inches from the thicker end. That way it will help this still come down. It will narrow it down instead of it looking wider. But you could use the full sheet too if you want it. You know, you can play around with all of these pieces and create different looks. So please keep your mind open to that, and don't just do how I've made it. Experiment and try different widths or cuts of paper to give yourself different looks. And this is how it's looking so far. You can see how the triangular pieces really give it that curved look. Now we're going to create this piece, which this one looks a little smaller than that one, but because this is smaller scale, I'm just going to make it the same size as the second little bauble right here. Except because it is at the bottom of the leg, I'm not going to add that little rectangle on to beef it up a little bit. I'm just going to put it, I'm just going to quill it up and have it be slightly larger than this part, just for some interest. I'm gonna let that glue sit there a minute. It's a triangular piece and it will taper inward. And this is how it's looking so far. And now to finish off the bottom, because you can see we don't have much space left, I'm just going to do a little strip of paper, not a triangular or anything, just to finish it off. I only did about 1/8 of an inch wide, and I'm not going to use the whole strip. And I'm going to start rolling it and see how it looks, and I may cut off some more. When you start that strip, you could leave a little space where there's not going to be anything. I think that's good. I think I'm gonna go like that. And here's the table leg inspired by this picture. So you could see that you could come up with all kinds of combinations by looking at some for inspiration, or just coming up with your own once you get the idea of how it's done. I think what I'll do too is I will try to create a pattern of these pieces and have that as a download but I do encourage you to get creative and try to cut your own triangles and slanted edges and everything to come up with some spindle legs of your own. It's really quite a bit of fun, and you don't have to do any math. You can just do a bunch of eyeballing. This is the first piece that I created, so I'm going to call it the prototype. And then I created a pattern, and this is how it turned out. And the link for this one will be in my description. I have some wood glue, and I don't think it matters what brand that you use. This is just the one that I have. The next step is to paint these spindles with some wood glue. The wood glue makes the lines less noticeable. I can't say that it takes the lines away, but it just diminishes them quite a bit, especially if you were to put 2 coats on. I've gone ahead and painted them with some acrylic paint, and I sealed them with Mod Podge. This part of the legs, you could get some of this wood and cut them the lengths that you need, and then of course drill the hole and put the leg in. So if it does not come out for you cutting the pieces on your own, just know that you can work with that pattern. And I will be putting the letter of the pattern piece up on the screen so that you'll know which piece is which when you follow along with the video. And allow yourself to practice, and don't be discouraged, and make some mistakes first, and just know that it won't always come out perfect on your first try. Thank you so much everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.